Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lady Disdain Reads. My name is Beatrice, and I'm finally back with another video on my favourite Jane Austen adaptations after a long break. These have been some really intense few months. I finished the first semester of my PhD, which has been very rewarding and very tiring. My baby is almost 9 months now, it's coming up to a year in just a few more months. And I am back in England for Christmas and for the holidays, and I finally have found some time to make another video. I'm really excited about it. I have got my mug of tea, so let's get straight into it. So when I was planning for this video, I was trying to limit myself to my top 5 Jane Austen adaptations. Now, I have limited myself to television and film, although I know that there are some good play adaptations out there, some theatre adaptations of Jane Austen out there. Maybe I'll talk about those another time. And I plan on making some more videos in the future based on some work I've done for my PhD on Jane Austen. So particularly I want to talk about the theatre and Jane Austen, but for today I've got a really fun, much more light-hearted video for you. And as I was thinking about my favourite adaptations, I realised that maybe they're a little bit controversial, so I expect to find some disagreements in the comments, and that's fine, and we can have a conversation about why I think I'm right and you probably think you're right. So let's get straight into it. I will have 5 of favourite adaptations and then a couple honourable mentions and one modern retelling that I think, although not a straight adaptation, is a fantastic one to check out. So I'm not really trying to do a ranking of all the adaptations out there. There are too many. I might be able to do that in the future, we'll see. But these are my top 5 favourite ones. They are kind of in order of my favourite ones, so 1 to 5, but some of them could shift around in the future and they keep changing, so they're all very good, basically. So in first position, perhaps rather controversially, because I know some people didn't like this one, is Autumn de Wilde's 2020 Emma, with a full stop at the end. Yes, I know, some people really didn't like this one. On first seeing it, I didn't like it that much. And fun fact, it was the last film I saw before the pandemic began back in 2020. I watched it at the cinema on Valentine's Day with my husband, so it was a perfect date for us back then. And I really have changed my mind on this one. I know why some people don't like it. It's very stylized. It's very, very funny in an almost offbeat kind of way, in a slightly edgier way than some other Austen adaptations are. It has a kind of quick, sarcastic humour that we do associate with Jane Austen, but that I think we don't associate with Emma so much. I've seen lots of Emma adaptations that, although very charming, are very subtle in their humour. They're not particularly over the top, and they try to bring out the nicer qualities of Emma as a character. They try to make her seem very compassionate. They try to make her seem gentler than she is in the novel. Whereas in this adaptation, Emma is, she's supercilious, she's arrogant, and she's really snobbish, which she is in the novel. But I think this slightly edgier, slightly more sarcastic sense of humour, coupled with an interpretation of Emma as this really arrogant, proud character, I think that's left some people a little bit confused or a little bit thrown off, but that's exactly what I ended up liking about this adaptation the more times I rewatched it, because I think it really is true to the spirit of the novel. Emma's an unlikable character. I made a whole video about this a few months ago. She's not a nice person. She's not necessarily a very good person to begin with, but I think portraying her like this in this film adaptation makes her redemption arc at the end that much more satisfying, and that's one of the reasons why I've come to really enjoy this adaptation a lot. And not to mention the fact that it's visually stunning, it's so beautiful, the costumes are fantastic and extremely period accurate. They look like great Regency costumes. Some of the patterns, you can see that they were inspired by some of the costumes at the Victoria and Albert Museum, so definitely historically accurate. And the soundtrack is fantastic. It has probably the best Mr. Elton of any adaptation of Emma that I have seen, so definitely recommend on all of those and all of those reasons. Um, I think there is only one con, which is that it can be slightly odd at times. For example, at the end, Emma has a nosebleed kind of randomly, and I wasn't really sure what that is about. And there is a tiny bit of nudity that's completely unnecessary, but other than that, I think it's a fantastic adaptation, and I really hope it grows on people more as the years pass, because I think they did a great job on that one. In second place, this time not so controversially, I think, is the 1995 BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. I almost feel like I don't need to explain why this is a good adaptation, but just to quickly run through it, it's long enough that it can be subtle, and it has the space to include, I think, most lines from the actual novel Pride and Prejudice. It's very faithful both in spirit and in plot, and in the actual lines. The dialogue is all there from the novel itself. It has a great cast. Jennifer Ehle is my favorite Elizabeth, with no doubts. She's fantastic. And what else? It's also very beautiful. But this is where I will say I still enjoy it immensely whenever I rewatch it. But I have noticed that it has started to look a little bit dated, because it's almost, I think, 30 years old at this point. No, it definitely is, because it's from 1995. So it's getting on to being 30 years old, and you can tell, and you have the random occasional kind of flashback scene where the face of the person writing a letter is kind of shown in the background of the face of the person reading the letter, and it looks a bit silly now because we're not really used to that style of cinematography anymore. But other than that, it is still a fantastic adaptation, and one that I think possibly should be your first Austen adaptations that you watch. So watch that first, and then watch Emma, but 2020 Emma. In third position, this is where it gets really controversial, and I know people would disagree, but hear me out, is the 1990 Whit Stillman film Metropolitan. No, it is not a direct Austen adaptation, but it is, in my opinion, the most faithful adaptation of Mansfield Park. Stillman was directly influenced by Mansfield Park in writing and directing his film Metropolitan. In fact, the novel Mansfield Park is mentioned throughout the film. They even mentioned the famous essay on Mansfield Park by the famous literary critic Lionel Trilling. So, Stillman did his research. There is a lot there that is taken from the novel and from discussions around the novel. It's fantastic. And the main characters, although not all characters from Mansfield Park have a direct equivalent in Metropolitan, the main characters certainly do. So there is an Edmund Bertram figure, and there is definitely a Fanny Price figure, and then a few of the other characters are kind of mixtures of different characters from Mansfield Park. It deals with very much the same issues. It deals with fidelity and adultery. It deals with immorality. It deals with the very rich and how their lives can be complicated and, I guess, unhappy and fraught as much as anyone else's lives, even though they look perfect on the outside. So it's about wealth, it's about conflict, it's about young people interacting with each other and feeling like they don't really have a compass to guide them. And I think the main character, Aubrey Rouget, is just a masterpiece of a character. She's incredibly interesting, and she is interesting in a way that Fanny Price also is, but because her character is brought to life on the screen, we can really see the subtleties of her emotions and her behavior in a way that is hard to in the book Mansfield Park, because Fanny Price doesn't speak much, and it's harder to empathize with her, I think, for some people, whereas in Metropolitan, you really do empathize with the main character. So it's done extremely well. And I didn't mention what it's about, but it's basically about the lives of upper middle class to upper class young people. I think they're first year college students in 1960s New York. So I really think that the social context translates very well. It maps onto Metropolitan very well from Mansfield Park. So I would definitely recommend it. It is fantastic. You will not be disappointed. Um, at number four, we have yet another Whit Stillman film. I can make a whole video about my love of Whit Stillman. He's a fantastic director. And this time it is his 2016 film, Love and Friendship, which is based on a Jane Austen novel. And this is a much more straightforward Austen adaptation. But it's actually based on Austen's short epistolary novel, Lady Susan. And for whatever reason, Whit Stillman decided to rename it Love and Friendship, which confusingly is a short story from Austen's Juvenilia. I'm not quite sure why he decided to do that, but it is a fantastic film. Again, it has a great cast, great acting, and actually, the thing that is so impressive about this film is that Whit Stillman expanded upon Lady Susan, the Jane Austen novel, and turned it into something much longer and into a much more complete story, I think. And most of the dialogue was created by Whit Stillman because the story in the Jane Austen story, Lady Susan, it's told through letters, so there isn't much dialogue. But of course, this is a film, so it needs a lot more dialogue than that. So he created most of the dialogue for the film, but it really does read, or I guess it watches in this case, like a Jane Austen novel. It's or like a Jane Austen film. I really found it hard to believe that that the dialogue wasn't from Jane Austen. It's fantastic. The pace is great. It's hilarious. It's, I think, the funniest Austen adaptation that I've ever seen. The costumes are wonderful. The music, which I think was composed by Mark Suazo, who always works with Stillman, is just fantastic. It's a visual treat. It's a treat to listen to. In every way, it is a fantastic film. And Whit Stillman even released a book version of his film, so he novelized Jane Austen's short epistolary novel, Lady Susan, into a non-epistolary novel, which he called Love and Friendship, but basic plot is the same, and the book is also well worth reading. It's really good. And at number five, even more controversially perhaps, I'm really letting people down, I think, who think that I'm an Austen purist today, so sorry about that. At number five is the 1995 film Clueless, which is supposed to be a loose adaptation / modern retelling of Emma. Again, there are two Emma films in here, which I'm surprised by because I don't think Emma's my favourite book by any means, but I think these are two fantastic adaptations of it. Like Metropolitan, it is not a direct adaptation, and at the end of the day, it's hard to find such a thing anyway, so I don't mind. But it really does capture the spirit perfectly of Emma the novel, and it finds a new social context that maps on really well from Emma in 1990s Beverly Hills. And so the context is completely different, but again, it's dealing with really young people, like Metropolitan, who are very well off and who have similar issues from the original novel. So it just works really well. It's an extremely self-aware film. It's funny, and the main character, Cher, is actually really, really close to Emma in personality, so it works fantastically. Again, like some of the films I've already mentioned, it now seems a little bit dated. Some of the jokes are maybe not as easy to get, but other than that, it's a great film, and you should all watch it. Give it a go. It's a teen movie, but it does what it does so well, so it's worth watching. Now, these are my top five, but I have a couple of honorable mentions. An honorable mention for a straightforward Austen adaptation, I think, would have to be the 1995 film adaptation of Persuasion. Now, you know how I feel about the latest 2022 Netflix Persuasion, which I thought was an absolute train wreck of an adaptation and really disrespected Anne Elliot's character and just threw everything that is good about the original novel out of the window. This, instead, is the adaptation to watch, the 1995 one. It's got great acting. It's the only adaptation of Persuasion, in my opinion, that really captures the melancholy of the novel, that captures Anne's personality and its subtlety and its richness, and that really captures the tension and the longing between the two main characters. It is slow-paced, which is what you want for Persuasion. It is subtle, it is somber. It is not an adaptation that tries to take Persuasion and make it into Emma or Pride and Prejudice. It knows that Persuasion is different and it pays homage to it. It's fantastic. Watch it. Now, not quite an Austen adaptation, but let's say my favorite Austen inspired film or Austen inspired retelling would have to be the 2013 film Austenland. People really slept on this film and still do. And I don't understand why, because I think it's absolutely fantastic. The main premise is that this woman called Jane Hayes, who's an American woman in her 30s and she's sort of disillusioned with life, she goes to England to stay at a resort that calls itself Austenland, where she is going to have a kind of Austen immersive experience. But everyone there, other than the other female residents, everyone else is an actor. So people are paid to pretend to be in love with her, to pretend that she's this kind of glamorous Regency lady who is, spends all her time reading and embroidering and all these things. And so she kind of lives a fake Austen reality for a few weeks. And the premise sounds bizarre, but the actual film is fantastic. It is hilarious, it has got the best jokes, and it's very meta-dramatic, which took me aback. It's a film that is very aware of what it's doing, and it's camp and ridiculous in all the right kinds of ways, and it knows it's doing that. It doesn't take itself seriously. And it really, I guess, captures the problem that we have when Austen fans focus on all the superficial aspects of Austen. So they like the costumes, they like the nice clothes, they like the language, they like the dancing, but don't realize the reality of what it's like to actually live in Jane Austen's times. So it's really self-aware and really reflective in a way that is just brilliant. And please go watch it. I could keep talking about it for a long time. It's really, really good. And finally, another honourable mention, this time for a Jane Austen modern retelling sequel, would be I think it's 2013 miniseries adaptation of a novel by P.D. James, who I think passed away a few years ago, and she was mainly a detective fiction / kind of murder mystery writer. Fantastic at writing detective fiction. I recommend all of her books. And she wrote a novel called Death Comes to Pemberley, from which this adaptation, this BBC miniseries, is taken. And the premise is that there is a murder at Pemberley a few years after Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy get married, and it's absolutely charming. It's a very Christmassy, very cozy miniseries, and I can't really say much about it without giving away the plot, other than I think the character of Georgiana Darcy is expanded on in this series beautifully, and in the book itself, because we don't see much of her in Pride and Prejudice, and I think P.D. James does a great job of showing what Mr. Darcy's sister's life would have been like years after Pride and Prejudice takes place. So it's very good, it's very, very cozy, and it's exactly the kind of thing to watch over the holidays, I think. Now, I probably didn't include some people's favorites in this video. I know people have a real love of the Ang Lee adaptation of Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson, and I do too. I think it's a fantastic film. And also, of course, people adore the 2005 Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. Both these films, I think, are fantastic films in their own right. I just don't think they are quite as good as Austen adaptations, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy them. I just think some of the adaptations I mentioned are perhaps less usual, but really, really good and really interesting Austen adaptations. Now, I will probably leave here for today, as this video is already getting too long as usual, but I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your favourite Austen adaptations are in the comments down below. Fight me. I'm really looking forward to having my mind changed or changing your mind. And yeah, hopefully in the future I can make more videos about Austen adaptations and review them. So hopefully I will be able to make another video on Jane Austen and the theatre at some point over the next few weeks. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Eve and a good start to the next year. And I will see you all very soon in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!